Here's the state of play for everybody. Donald Trump is the Republican nominee. I have thoughts on DeSantis, and I might as well give them to you. And I don't want to make friends of mine mad. I've kept my mouth largely shut in assessing it out of respect for the campaign until DeSantis got out. So let me just tell you my view of the campaign. And it began before the campaign begun. I don't know that DeSantis, the moment Trump was indicted, could have done anything differently. But had DeSantis chosen to get into the race when it was obvious he was in the race, he probably would be faring differently than he is now. I think it was a mistake for Ron DeSantis to wait. Just go back to example for the year 2000. George W. Bush was in a similar situation. He wanted to wait for the Texas legislature to wrap up its work before he got in. But he came out and said he was going to form an exploratory committee and was thinking about running. And as the Texas legislature wound down, he showed up and announced that he really was running. And in the meantime, he had surrogates out there defending him. He could spend some money. He could run a presidential campaign while still making sure that he was the governor of Texas first. DeSantis didn't do any of that, and it was a strategic mistake. The man has had more money, and this is a true number. DeSantis had more money spent against him than all other candidates combined. More money attacked Ron DeSantis than all the other candidates combined. In fact, more money attacked Ron DeSantis than used to promote any of the other candidates combined. It was a sheer avalanche of money made real easy because everybody knew he was going to run and he didn't get into the race, and so he didn't respond. And he allowed them to define him for a segment of the population early. And then what did he do coming in? He launched it on Twitter on a site that crashed. He killed the very beginning of his campaign. Now, I've got friends who to this day will insist that was not a fatal mistake. Yeah, it was a fatal mistake out of the gate. You know, I wrote a piece then, and it was just so petty of me, I deleted it. But I wrote a piece then to timestamp that day saying, here's why DeSantis lost. And it wasn't that he started on Twitter, but that was indicative of the style of campaign he wanted to run. He wanted to run a campaign unlike any campaign ever done before. And the reason people run campaigns the way they run campaigns is because it works. Ron DeSantis dragging it out when everyone knew he was running instead of doing an exploratory committee like Bush did, allowed others to pour money in to attack him and define him before he could even chance to respond. And then on the day he decides to launch his campaign, he cedes control to Elon Musk on an unstable platform that collapses. And the initial story about DeSantis' campaign is its failure to launch because he did it with Elon Musk and what's his name from Elon's friend. They're Russia sympathizers. He does it on Twitter. The whole thing is unstable. And all the DeSantis supporters are like, oh, he answered policy questions. Nobody cares about that crap. Nobody cares about Ron DeSantis' ability to give you a 25-point plan on some esoteric piece of federal policy. They care about what his message is. And honestly, I don't know that he had one other than I'm Trump, but not. And it turns out the American people on the Republican side want Donald Trump, not Trump-like. And I don't mean that disparagingly of DeSantis. I had him on my program a couple of times, and I kept pushing him on his economic message. And his economic message was always, well, I cut toll fees for people in Florida. He said that in multiple interviews on this very program. When I asked him, what does he want the American people to know about his economic vision? It's he cut the toll in Florida. Most Americans don't have toll roads, let alone Florida. Make America Florida wasn't any more compelling than Gavin Newsom's Make America California. People in Iowa like Iowa. They're there by choice. That was the frustrating thing I had. The bottom line here on the DeSantis campaign to me is that it felt, and it, just so you understand, I have run political, and no, I've never run a presidential campaign, but I have run congressional campaigns. I've run statewide races. I've run state legislative races. I've run local races. They're all largely operate the same, just at scale. A presidential election is statewide elections in 50 different states, trying to find messages to persuade people in at least 15 states because of the swing states in your core base. DeSantis' campaign struck me the entire time as a series of tactics without an overarching strategy. You have to have an overarching strategy and message, and I just don't know what his overarching message and strategy is. With Donald Trump, what is it? Make America great again. Everybody knows Donald Trump, every speech, he's going to make America great again. He says it in almost every speech. What was Ron DeSantis's? That's kind of the problem. The DeSantis campaign decided to think outside the box in how they structured their campaign. They relied heavily on never back down. They funded it aggressively. The super PAC was going to build the ground game. Well, the ground game needs a message to sell. They never got it from the campaign. It changed regularly. It was an extremely online campaign, hence the launch on Twitter. There were problems along the way. Now, for those of you who are yelling at me, why do you say something? Oh, I said a lot behind the scenes. I wasn't going to drag the candidate. I wrote some about it. I said some here. I said a lot behind the scenes. But the campaign just never took off. And a lot of people say that's the candidate. And yeah, to the extent the candidate owns it, the candidate has to own it. It is the candidate's campaign. But also, concurrently, when you're surrounded by brilliant strategists, you should get your strategy right. And I don't know that he ever did. I don't think Nikki Haley's Haley Mary pass, she's going to try to throw a Hail Mary in New Hampshire today. I don't think it's going to work. But Haley went the distance. She had an entire strategy mapped out. She's had a message about the future, about a woman in charge needing an accountant in the White House. And I don't think it'll work for her. And again, I don't know that anything could change. The bulk of the Republican Party wants Trump versus Biden 2.0. Much of the party feels like 2020 was stolen. They want to see if they can stop the steal this time. But for all the ridicule that Haley got, what she did that allowed her to last longer than Ron DeSantis is not try to be Trump without Trump, but to try to be her own person. It'll come to a stop after tomorrow. I don't think there are any surprises. You're going to find the media trying very, very hard to build suspense and excitement of the race. I don't really think that there is any at this point. I think Donald Trump is going to be the nominee for better or worse. And I do mean for better or worse. Donald Trump is someone who will galvanize a lot of the Republican Party, who can inspire and excite them, but he can also incite a lot of Democrats to mobilize their turnout. And if you pay attention to the focus groups that are out there, to the polling data that's out there, to what the campaigns themselves are finding, there is a portion of the country that is just committed to the idea that Donald Trump won't be the Republican nominee. And when they wake up to it, they may not like it. We don't know how that's going to play out. Everyone says the polling is wrong. The polling has been pretty good so far. It's gotten Iowa right. I think it's going to get New Hampshire right. And if so, you also need to pay attention to the polling of those who voted in 2020 who aren't happy with Trump, and they haven't changed their minds. That could play to Biden's advantage. However, there's a lot that can play to Donald Trump's advantage as well coming into 2024. This is going to be a close race. They've been very close races for the past number of years. Maximizing your turnout and changing independents to be your supporters is going to be big for both candidates. And the thing that Donald Trump has going for him that the Democrats simply refuse to appreciate is that until COVID hit, and it was COVID, it wasn't Trump. Until COVID hit, Americans didn't have inflation and crime waves and a bad economy. And if he can remind people of how good it was, and everyone who's voting will have lived during that era, Donald Trump's got a winning message. It is foolish for anyone to think Donald Trump cannot win this race. Anyone who tells you he can't win has not been paying attention to the past 8 years. In 2016, I really didn't think he could win. I learned my lesson and decided I needed to figure out what everybody was saying outside of my own bubble. And outside of your bubble, those of you on the right, you need to understand there's a lot of angst about Trump among independent voters and even some Republicans. But of you Democrats, you need to understand For all these people who have anxiety about Trump, they have hard economic times under Joe Biden. So the question is, which will win out for the voters? And pocketbook tends to win.
Want to be on the show?